It's always good to see you, Massimo, and thanks for taking the time to be with us today. And I think I always appreciate your heart for the gospel and also your heart for Malaysia and specifically Kuala Lumpur. And I'm always encouraged and helped by a lot of the analysis you have and commentary you have and for this country and this part of the world. So, and Massimo's got a great mic there, and he's got even better voice. He's got a radio voice. So hopefully you'll enjoy that as well as he talks with us today. So
thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Before we get started, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your background, Massimo. How did you, where'd you grow up, and how did you end up in Kuala Lumpur, or KL as we refer to it locally?
Well, yeah. Well, thanks, and thanks, Jesse, for being on at this time. I know it's I think 1 a.m. for you. So, yeah. So I am half Malaysian, half Italian. I was actually born in a city a bit further from Kuala Lumpur in Malacca. My mom is Malaysian Portuguese, which is a people group here in Malaysia that comes from 15th century Portugal when they were here in Malaysia. My father was Italian. They got to know each other in Malacca. I was born there, and then I grew up in 6 different countries. My father was setting up factories around the globe for a multinational organization, a German company, and therefore that brought us from Singapore into Germany. So Malacca, Singapore, Germany. I was in Germany for about 15 years or about 12 years, and then went to China. I was living in China for about 4 years. Was sent to boarding school because I needed reformation, I guess. So I was sent to boarding school. It was a prestigious prep school. So think about like a Hogwarts for Muggles in that way. Nobody had magic power. The only power people had there was money. And then went to university in Belgium, Antwerp, and then came back to Malaysia. And I came back to Malaysia to finish my university here in Kuala Lumpur. I was living with my grandmother at that point of time, and been here since then. So that's about 20 years ago that I came back to Kuala Lumpur. So finished my university studies here, started work, became a Christian here, felt the call to full-time ministry, and that all happened here back in Kuala Lumpur. And right now, maybe I'd say I'm married to Gloria, my wife, and she works in one of the big 4 companies here in Kuala Lumpur, and she's also mixed. She's half Chinese and half Kalabit. Kalabit is a tribe from East Malaysia. So we are a very mixed couple, and praying for very mixed children soon.
That's good. Yeah, it was great to have Gloria with us in our first cohort here is for Resource Global as well in KL. So I know there's a lot more to your story as well, Massimo. So thanks for giving us just that. And that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg for you. So maybe for those who aren't familiar with Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur specifically, maybe you could just give us just share about what's unique about KL and this city, and also just Malaysia, maybe in general, in this part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably lots of things to talk about, but the first things that will come to my mind is just the cultural makeup of Kuala Lumpur or Malaysia, and we are an Asian melting pot in that way. We have 3 primary races that make up the nation, which is they call it Bumiputra, which is Malay, which is Muslim majority population, and then we have Chinese ethnic groups, and that's primary Buddhist, Confucian, Taoist background, and then Indian population as well, which could be either also Muslim or Hindi or Hindu background as well, and then we have others like my wife or myself. My mom, she comes from a Portuguese ethnic group, which is Malaysian. And my wife, for example, she's half Kalabit, which is a tribal background from East Malaysia. So we have many other kind of ethnic groups as well. But that's very unique in that way that we have a primary language here, which is Bahasa Malay. But there's many languages. So if you go to Kuala Lumpur, there's many different languages spoken, from Cantonese to Mandarin to Tamil to Bahasa Malay. And then in a way, in Kuala Lumpur, the lingua franca is still English, and that's the business language primarily, or Mandarin. If you talk about population distribution, it is Bumi Putra majority, so it's majority Muslim nation, and with over 60% in the country. Now, if you look at Kuala Lumpur, the statistics change a little bit. There is a bit more Chinese population in Kuala Lumpur, which makes it maybe about 50% Bumi Putra, and then 50% makes up the other things. But another very unique thing about Kuala Lumpur is that 25% of our labor force is made up by migrant workers. And these migrant workers are coming from UUPGs, means unreached, unengaged people groups around Southeast Asia and Asia. So in a way, we always like to say, reach Kuala Lumpur and you reach the nations. And there's great opportunity for us to reach people here in the city, because the people, the migrant workers who come to the city are coming to the city to look for hope, to look for new life, to look for new identity. Some of them are refugees. Some of them are just trying to make a life. Some of them are trying to bring back prosperity or finances back to their families back home. So they need hope. They need life. They need something new identity. And even though they're not looking for it in Christ, Christ is the answer for all of this for them ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very vibrant city, a large city. I think Klang Valley is what we kind of call the metro area. It's about 8 to 9 million people.
That's right. And with all I've just mentioned, there's the normal dynamics of being a large urban city. I know that has all the dynamics of a global city as well.
Right. What would you say is something? We're going to ask you a little bit about some of the challenges and issues in KL. But before we kind of get into that, what is something that really excites you about Kuala Lumpur as you kind of look at the future? You look at everything you've described and the kinds of people that are coming here, kinds of people that live here. There's also the in-country migration, people coming from small villages or kampongs, as they're called, into the city. So it really is the center. What is that really excites you about the city? Why do you enjoy living there?
Well, I always grew up in large cities around the globe, so I love living in cities. I just love cities. But what excites me here is just the potential the city has. And if you read in Revelations, all people, all tribes, all nations worshiping God together, that is something which this city holds that potential, and that there's so many people from different places coming together, and so that's exciting. Of course, the city is growing and becoming more influential regionally as well. Just talk about birth rates, we are growing about 80,000 a year. Right now, and that's not even considering migrants coming in and people from the kampongs or from the villages moving in. So the city is growing. It's growing in influence. It's growing economically. The potential it has. But what's really exciting is slowly, in terms of gospel work, slowly we're really seeing different pockets of people from different denominations, from different backgrounds, just popping up all over the city. And engaging the city with various things. We see a lot of younger Christians coming up and doing their own podcasts. We see different organizations trying to mobilize things. So you're really seeing different organizations moving in and trying to do work for the gospel. So it seems that there is some kind of movement slowly happening, and that's really exciting to see as well.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that as we go as well. Why don't we talk about some of the challenges, some of the issues that are kind of common to, you could say, Malaysia as a whole, but we could talk specifically about Kuala Lumpur. What are some of the common issues that are specific to Kuala Lumpur, things that are reoccurring, that come up often, that you're facing there?
Well, and there's a couple of things that come to my mind. I think some of them might not just be specific Kuala Lumpur, so other cities or other countries might face similar situations. I think because of the ethnic diversity that we have here, often there's also an ethnic divide that comes with that as well. So rather than everybody being united, they're a little bit segregated, and that also shows up in the church in a way that we have, you know. Bahasa speaker. So language-wise, of course, that's already a need. That there you have different kind of churches that cater to different languages, and as the languages also often come together with a particular people groups, then you'll see different people groups actually gathering in different churches. But even if you speak about English-speaking churches, and even within the English-speaking churches, you will have Indian English-speaking churches, and you have international English-speaking churches, and you have Chinese English-speaking churches. So there seems a bit more of a divide, and some churches have done better in uniting, and some lesser in that sense. And generally, with that comes a bit of a still divided church. People are not collaborating as much as they could. So there's still a bit of a divide, and I think that's probably common among different denominations in other cities as well, other places as well. Even denominational divides that come there. So it's less of a unity and collaboration, even though there's changes happening now. It's still predominantly a divided church, and thirdly, it's an old, aging church. There was great work and revival in the 70s and 80s, and you see some great leaders who did some great work, who are still leading the churches, who built fantastic churches in Kuala Lumpur and around Malaysia, who are leading them well. But somehow within the Malaysian church, there's been a lack of handing down leadership to younger generations, or raising up the next generations of leaders. So we have a rather old leading church, and so that kind of creates a difficulty in the way that most churches, or many churches, are, rather than seeing how can I raise up people to send out, they're trying to raise up people to take over their role. And when that happens naturally, and I think there's no malice behind it in anybody's, but if that is the situation, then you're a bit more guarded with where you would like your leaders to go to or participate in, because you're afraid that they might go somewhere else, and you actually need them to take over your role in that sense. So there's a bit more of a guarded hand over what the associate pastor or the younger pastor, or youth pastor, or all kind of areas that they can participate in or collaborate with, because there people are trying to raise the next generation of leaders within their own church, because there's so few of them right now.
Right. Yeah, that's really good. I think maybe we can, I might come back to some of the things you mentioned. There's quite a bit there to unpack. So maybe we can talk a little bit specifically now about some of the challenges that young Christian marketplace leaders face in Malaysia and KL specifically, but maybe talk a little bit about the workplace. What are the obstacles? What are the challenges? We could talk just in general about what is the cultural environment, hours, and people's expectations from bosses, and then as a believer, as a Christian in that particular these environments, what are the challenges that they're facing?
Well, again, challenges that probably any professional will face in a big global thriving city. So people are very success or work orientated. KPI oriented in the way that they do things, but I think there are additional layers that come, especially here in Kuala Lumpur. So again, maybe some statistics on that. The average person in the marketplace works about 4 hours overtime a day, unpaid overtime a day. So that's about 12 hours of work in average. So that makes them a very busy people, a very tired people. If you add 2 hours of commute to that, so that's 14 hours. You add 6 hours of sleep to that, hopefully, that's 20 hours. If you add personal hygiene for an hour there, and then running errands for 2 hours, you pretty much have 1 hour to yourself. And how do you disciple people within that 1 hour that they have free? And secondly, the question comes, how do you engage non-Christians and get them to give up the only hour that they might potentially have. So it has great impact on discipleship. But that's something about the marketplace there, and the big thing in Malaysia as well is the power gap index, which is just the power gap index measures the distance, the power distance between an employee and an employer. So that means how much power does the employer have over the employee, and and how normalized that is within the country. That means actually people are okay with that. They think that's the normal way of operating. And Malaysia in some sites is very high up there, and in some others we are number one. And this is not the place where you want to be number one, but it pretty much means we have kings and slaves, or masters and slaves, and that it means it takes a lot of dedication and towards your work, and there's a lot of control over the employees in the work, and they have to give a lot of their life towards their work because of that. So that's the kind of environment that you want to do. And if you want to make it, if you want to be successful, that means you have to give a lot of time, a lot of effort towards the work, and your identity is all wrapped up in that here.
Yeah, and what kind of challenges do you see? Young leaders, young believers facing in terms of just being able to walk with Christ, walk with the Lord throughout their work week, maybe, as you've talked about, just the pressure on their time, so that maybe they come to Sunday. Are people kind of just exhaling, would you say? They're just, and they really haven't had a chance to connect with God? Are they walking with him throughout that week, or is it mostly a weekend walk? How would you describe?
Yeah, so I think that pretty much depends on the dynamics of the church that you're in. And I think those churches who kind of made it more of an exhale, come and rest, have made it more exciting and are more attractive towards the young professionals specifically, in that sense. And so different, but it is a big struggle. So the big struggle that the professionals have is how do I faithfully walk in my everyday at work, and how does the gospel take real hold of my life as I'm forced into a culture and in a place where maybe my values as a Christians are going to ostracize me, are going to be ridiculed, are not going to be valued. Me taking time for small group discipleship groups, coming to church is going to be not approved, or whereby everybody else is working, and after they're working, they're going out to the bar and hanging out and having conversations, and then you leaving that aspect of where social capital is built among your coworkers, and you're then going to a discipleship with the church. Are you being taken away from the area where you can make progress within your career because you're rubbing shoulders with the right people? I think these are the questions that are being asked, and then just a lot of times, especially for young professionals, when they come out of Christian backgrounds and they grew up in the church, they're usually asked to serve quite a bit in the church. So they're usually the AV team, they're usually the worship leaders. So church feels like another thing to do, where another older person is controlling me and telling me how I should do. And they have that all week long already in their work. Most of them come from a background where their parents are also telling them how to live. And now there's a church that's telling them how to perform on a Sunday as well. So it doesn't become very restful, and that's something which is a big problem, I think, here, why lots of younger people are choosing certain churches rather than others.
Yeah. Well, we're going to start to transition to the Gospel City Network, which is a lot of work with pastors. Before we get into that, maybe you can just talk about how do most pastors or church leaders or elders, how have they come alongside young marketplace workers, leaders, people that have that are doing everything that you've described, and what does that sort of look like? What does that strengthening look like, and what are some of the gaps in the church to strengthen, people that are working every day in order to sort of help them integrate their work and their faith to not see themselves as second-class Christians, but see their work as their ministry, as their service to God?
Well, I mean, that's probably a lot of questions and a lot of ways to tackle that. But maybe just again some maybe some thoughts to consider around that. I mean, many, many, many. I think the difficulty is that churches and pastors need to ask the question: how do I pastor people in the marketplace well? And that seems to be a dynamic that not necessarily everybody has really thought through. And you can see churches who have thought through that are doing very well in ministering and walking alongside these people. And
Right.
there is a sense of walking with them, asking them questions, hearing their problems, their struggles, praying for them. And a lot of things has to do with reminding them of gospel truths. Now,
Mm.
there is multiple layers of dynamics that now have to play at that. Now, if imagine you're a church leader and you have an older congregation and you want to get younger people to come in, and you're having this young person, and that person's in the marketplace, you hope that person will come to full-time ministry, and you're trying to encourage it. So often what the language could be that is used is like, why don't you serve God more by coming to full-time ministry? And I think it's very unintentional, and I think it's meant with the best intentions. So I don't think there's, again, any
Sure.
mischief, but sometimes that language could then create a divide between the sacred and the secular, in the way saying that the ministry work is a better work than the marketplace work. And I think that is not helpful, because ultimately, if everybody will be thinking, how can I serve God best in the place I am? Then they're thinking about their place or their ministry in the marketplace. And I truly believe if people start thinking about it that way, some of them will be called to full-time ministry as they experience that work in the marketplace. They grow a
Sure.
heart for it and say, hey, I'm good at this, so maybe I should do this full-time as well. So there's various layers in place, and I think what pastors can do well is just really walk around, and mentoring is being very, very important. Most young professionals who I've spoken to and asked them, would you love to have an older person, a more mature Christian, to walk alongside with you, who hears you out, who prays with you, and is able to just walk alongside with you and remind you of gospel truths and give you some advice along the way? They say yes. It's not that they don't want to hear from the older generation. It's just that a lot of times that is not made available to them. So actually mentoring and actually being able to speak in the younger people's life is a very important thing, which doesn't necessarily have to happen from the pastor. There might be people within the congregation who might do a really great job in walking alongside with young professionals.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, hey, let's tell us a little bit about GCN, or the Gospel City Network. You're the executive director there in Malaysia, and just what's the overall aim and purpose for Gospel City Network in Malaysia?
Yeah. So Gospel City Network, we are an affiliate network of a City to City Asia Pacific. So City to City Asia Pacific is the regional network for City to City Redeemer City to City, which is of course from New York, founded by Tim Keller. And so we are the sub-regional network. So Gospel City Network is the sub-regional network for Malaysia. And our primary aim is twofold: is church revitalization and church planting. So we are hoping to provide good training content, resources, conferences. We're now a media platform that we're going to start soon as well, just to create content around the subject of revitalization and church planting. So when we say revitalization, what it means is working with the existing churches to strengthen them in their ministry, and because we believe that it is healthy, strong churches that will plant new churches, and we believe that new church plants are what's going to take it to revitalize the city, to be able to really start a gospel movement. So, at an ultimate aim for Gospel City Network is to be a gospel catalyst. So, I say that with as much humility as I can, because we as an organization cannot be the only one who work to that. So GCN is not Kuala Lumpur's or Malaysia's solution to the gospel. We're just an agency who's trying to work towards that, and we need many agencies in the city to be able to do that. And secondly, we are only trying to work around things that the Holy Spirit must do. I mean, God must do this. So in a way, I see our work as setting up the sails, so when God blows, the ship can move somewhere. So that's at the big vision point of view, that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to be gospel centered. We're trying to be city focused, and we're trying to be movement minded. So in a way that we're hoping whatever we do will catalyze the movement of the gospel from Kuala Lumpur towards other cities in Malaysia and beyond as well.
Yeah, can you share a little bit about the vision also with the planting churches, having a church within 5 minutes of every MRT station? I think it's a great part of your vision, which you've shared before. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we wanted to see what we need to sometimes quantify things, and so what would it look like for us to slowly bring the gospel and be successful, or what are some measurements that we can take on how our work is actually being translated in church plants. So we believe that city planners are intelligent people who know what they're doing, and they're setting up LRT and MRT, which is our train stations around the city, and they have good reasons why they set the LRTs in these specific areas. So what we are saying, we want to come alongside that, and our hope, our dream would be to see one church plant in 5 minutes distance from every one of those train stations, which is just talk about making the gospel accessible so that people from a particular train station can walk within 5 minutes. They will be able to hear a gospel preaching church. So to try to make this the gospel accessible, which means that we're thinking about it demographically, but as different neighborhoods need to be able to have access to the gospel. So that's one aspect that we're trying to work towards. And what that means is we don't really have a timeline for that. We're just working towards that, and hopefully within my lifetime we'll be able to see that. We are hoping that there'll be an exponential growth as churches are planted with a multiplication DNA built in them, that they will plant, and then there's an exponential growth that happens from there. We are currently working with another group of pastors here, where we are at the very beginning calling something the Valley 2040, where we're hoping to plant 40 churches by 2040. So we're at the very early beginnings of that, and we'll be doing more work towards that over the year, starting next year as well.
Yeah, another question sort of related to that, when we talk about that many churches, and I think I even asked you that a couple of years ago, is related to partnerships. Sometimes, people don't partner for theological reasons or maybe other reasons. They fail to work together. So how have you been able to sort of work with that when you talk about working with different kinds of churches, when you talk about wanting to see that many churches planted? You talk about gospel preaching churches as kind of one of the core criteria, but you're talking about churches from maybe a broad spectrum of background, denomination. Could you talk about that a little bit? And that's part of your vision, I believe, right?
Oh yeah. So Gospel City Network, we are a non-denominational or interdenominational organization. So we work with what some people have coined the P2P spectrum, the Pentecostal to Presbyterian spectrum. So we work with everybody along that. We love everybody, and but of course there are some ways or dynamics that are very clear that we have to uphold as an organization to do that. So we need to, I think individually for me, I need to have a good theological triage in a way that I understand my role in GCN. What are some things that we need to agree upon to work together in partnership here? What are some things that we can agree to disagree on and while we have partnership together? And for me personally, what convictions do I have about the scriptures and the gospel that I will joyfully pursue in my local church, which is different from what I would do in the broader organization. So we're not telling people don't have denominational convictions. I think we're saying have them within your local church, but there is something greater that we're doing. And if we look at the gospel, I think there's more things that unite us than that divide us, actually, if you're looking at the truths of the gospel. So we have great decisives. Some people coin the term decisives, or around which things we make decisions around, and a clear gospel understanding is something that means who Jesus is, what the work of Jesus is, and who God is. So anything that we would agree that somebody needs to affirm to be a Christian. and we focus on these things. And then when it comes to denominational practices like giftings, like tongues, like governance, like complementarian, egalitarian things, we say, well, have your convictions, but we agree to disagree on these things, and we don't teach or don't focus on these things. We focus more on a movement dynamics, gospel theology, and practical ministry and practical theology as we work things out. So so that's kind of how we have set up ourselves, and how we try to engage with everybody as we're doing the work.
Right. Yeah, I believe one of the things you have going on right now is an intensive, right? Is that right? A 2-week intensive where you're training. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that? What's that? And what's involved in that? And I know there's not enough time for this. I think we only have a few minutes, but can you just talk a little about, a gospel-centered church or a gospel preaching church in that intensive? At the end of that, what is it you're hoping that these church planners come out with that maybe would change the way they preach or the way they even think about that they haven't been thinking about? So that maybe come from a different perspective or what have you.
Yeah, and I want to be careful. I don't want to throw out the word gospel-centered or gospel preaching as a way to, we are better, but
right.
rather more than a dynamic or a way that we really see Jesus as a solution to all sin and all the brokenness of the world and that we're having right now, and preaching that in a particular way. But maybe just to talk about the intensive. So the intensive is actually run by City Asia Pacific, which is our mother organization. So they every year put on 2 intensive trainings, which is primary for church planters. Currently, I think there's about 14 or 15 church planters going through a training from all over Asia Pacific. And so people from Bhutan, people from Pakistan, people from Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand. So you name it, from all different kind of countries coming together. And we have about 30 to 40 observers coming in as well. Observers will be pastors or ministry leaders who are coming in to learn about the DNA of this gospel centrality that we're talking about as well, to use that for revitalization or be part of the ministry as well. And so it's a 2-week training that happens where they're being trained on, the first week is really more gospel and grace in you. What's the gospel, through thinking through gospel renewal dynamics, and how does the gospel take hold of your life? And then the second week is more the gospel through you. So how do you then translate that into ministry design and church planting, evangelistic pathways, and networking and gathering, finance and budgeting as well. Different things that we want to train, which we think are very vital for church planters to learn. So that's a format of training that we're doing, which is the intensive. We also do in Kuala Lumpur, we do something called incubator, where we do that over a year, where we then take church pastors or planters through a 8-month module. That means every month, one Saturday, we take to go through a training together. So that's on the intensive side, the kind of training that we're doing. There was a second part to your question. What was that after that?
Well, I think you covered quite a bit. Yeah,
Okay.
covered quite a bit there. That's perfect. Yeah, and I think people maybe even are listening in this area. If they want to have more information about that, they could follow up with you on that. I was part of that last year. It was life-changing, and still a lot to think through. But definitely, my paradigm has changed as well, just in terms of how thinking about ministry, thinking about even what what you hear in churches, and just how, as you said, Christ being the center and of our life. And
I
there's
think
so much more to that. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think there was the second part of your question. So what will be something we hope that people will come out of the intensive with that, right?
Yep.
And I think there is a lot of things, which is understanding the gospel from a cerebral level, but what does it mean to the gospel to really take hold of all of your life, so that the gospel is, I think the phrasing that Tim Keller uses is that the gospel is not just the ABC of your life, but it's the A through Z of your life. Or I think J.D. Greer said it's not just the springboard into the pool, but it's the whole pool. So how does the gospel penetrate through all of ministry, through all of life for everybody? And so that's a primary thing we try to teach and have discussions around and contextualize that. Contextualization is very important. How does it play out in different cultures and different settings? And I think the important thing also is just to recognize that our hearts ourselves are so easily moved. I mean, it's either to go to moralism or to go licentiousness. We are always wrestling match, and every day in our lives, I'm doing that. It's probably going on right now as if I'm speaking. Thinking about how am I being perceived. There's some gospel identity things going on. But so how do we go back to Christ for that, and how do we create healthy dynamics in our lives just to be focused on the gospel and not to move into moralism or licentiousness, but keep on nudging ourselves back to gospel centrality. So I think these are things that we hope people understand, learn how to do ministry that way, and learn how to preach that way as well.
Yeah, that's really good. I think we have a couple more minutes here. I want to just ask this question. One thing that keeps coming up during this the Global Church Forum here is empathy, and we've heard again and again the importance of humbling ourselves, listening to others, listening well, learning from one another. And so, just wanted to ask if there's any lessons or a lesson that you've learned from your work in Kuala Lumpur as it relates to this particular topic in terms of being empathetic and being humble, listening well. And learning from one another, especially in the last, I would say, almost 2 years, coming up on 2 years of everything that's gone on with the pandemic and other issues that how that sort of played out in Malaysia politically and for in other ways. How would you sort of respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things come to my mind. First of all, because of the pandemic, great humility. I think everyone learned that we have had many plans and many things that we thought we were going to do and that God was going to go behind and God's going to use. And then everything was wiped away and we had to rethink. And I think that just shows us that, even though we have all these plans, it's we got to just trust God and see how things go and to just follow along what he's doing and then work with that. So that's one thing. And through that, I think a lot of churches were disrupted and they started asking themselves questions on how we do church now. And that actually brought a lot of collaborations, because now different churches were kind of like, oh, I do not know how to engage with this. And I saw this great picture of younger pastors the older pastors are asking younger pastors, hey, how do I go online? And then helping them go online, and older pastors kind of like counseling younger pastors who were completely stressed out suddenly, and just kind of like mentoring them, saying, hey, this is ministry and you're going to be okay. So it was kind of this intergenerational thing going on, which was really great to see. And suddenly they were talking to each other and working with one another, which I think was a beautiful thing. For my life with humility, I think we're coming up to the end. I know that your wife, Sarah, asked me to talk about that just for a second, which is, sure. I grew up I experienced great brokenness in my life, coming out of drug addiction and seeing the gospel of grace work in my life. And I think that humbled me to see that if God can work powerfully in my life and through my brokenness, then there's a great possibility for God to work in everybody's life. And therefore, you never know the background, the history, or the state that somebody's in right now. But the gospel of grace is so powerful that they can change any life. So that just creates great humility in you, that just because somebody is acting in a broken way right now doesn't mean that they're a completely a person that has no hope. But the gospel of grace has hope for everybody, and God can work in just so many ways. And I think that just gives you humility to see that, well, you cannot be a judge. You just gotta bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to people, and God can work, and God will work. And there's nothing in my life that I did to be able to be saved, but God did all these things for me, and Jesus Christ died on the cross for me, even though I was sinful and broken. And I think that is just a humility that I need a reminder of regularly. I failed that, but that's the message that changes me, and you can see that being changed as people take hold of that, changing their lives and then changing their churches.
Well, I think we'll end on that note. Massimo, really thankful for that. Thank you for that encouragement, and a great reminder to me as well. And really appreciated our time. There's so much more we can talk about, and so thanks for your time. I pray that things go well with the intensive, and Yeah, just I'm really grateful for just how you're great at networking, great at bringing people together, and thankful for GCN and also your partnership with Resource Global as well, especially in the last couple of years. Just been so much help and advice and insight. So really want to thank you for your friendship, and hope to see you soon in person. So
Yeah. And yeah, thank
thanks,
you for your
Massimo.
partnership in the gospel. It's always great. Always a pleasure.